Welcome back. This is Inside Politics here on KTN News. Now, this week, President Uhuru Kenyatta appealed to the United Nations member states to support Kenya's bid for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council during the elections slated for June 2020. Kenyatta also addressed the UN General Assembly on regional security, fight against terrorism, and ongoing steps to resolve the Kenya-Somalia maritime border dispute. He was addressing the general debate of the 74th United Nations General Assembly in New York. Listen.
I want this opportunity to thank the African Union for the endorsement of Kenya's candidature to the Security Council for the year 2021-2022 and our pursuit for solutions to global challenges convinces us that we are well placed to contribute constructively in the Security Council. When the world had given up on our region, we in Kenya opened our doors to millions of people fleeing insecurity. To this day, we remain hosts to hundreds of thousands of refugees. Our investment in the Sudan negotiations led to the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2005, and we continue to support stabilization efforts in both Sudan and South Sudan. My administration continues to reach out to the Federal Republic of Somalia in an effort to find an amicable and sustainable solution to the maritime boundary disputes between us. In this regard, I welcome the decision of the African Union Peace and Security Council of the 3rd September 2019 that urges both parties to engage.
All right, so there was a meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York between President Kenyatta, President Farmajo, and the Egyptian President Al-Sisi. There was nothing binding there. It was an informal meeting from what we understand. But the President did call for talks or dialogue between Kenya and Somalia, saying the ICJ court proceedings should be the last resort. But Farmajo seems to have rejected that. He said his country will wait for the final hearing of the ICJ, seemingly not taking that call for dialogue by the president, by the Kenyan president. So this leaves this situation quite murky. A lot of people seeing this were hopeful that maybe there was something of a handshake between the two presidents. It seems that is not the case. Dismas, what is the latest in this? Farmajo seems to be hell-bent on having us go to the final hearing and no dialogue. He did not take that call by the President Uhuru Kenyatta. President Kenyatta seems not very assertive when he speaks about this, to be honest, according to many people watching this. What do you read in this?
I think we dropped the ball a long time ago when we let ourselves go before ICJ. And you know, times above number, even in this show, we had indicated that the only way to get out of this mess, out of this situation, is through either a bilateral or a multilateral conversation, so that people are able to transact and come up with a solution. But I think what we adopted was a Migingo-style approach to issues. We thought the maritime dispute around the Indian Ocean is like Migingo, it's a small rock, not knowing that there is a lot of international interest. Because we know for a fact that Somalia is not acting on its own motion. They're being sponsored by some capitalists, and I understand all of them are based in Norway. They're giving them a lot of support. But for us, you know, we sat back, and right now we are driving using the rear view mirror. And Kenya is not really asserting itself because we have not appreciated the consequences of the ICJ ruling in case it's not in our favor. Because what will happen if the ICJ says that territory is not within Kenya, then Kenya will be no different from Uganda or Rwanda or Burundi. Essentially, we'll be a sea-locked nation. When we are going to engage in international trade, we'll be paying Somali authorities some fee for us to come through these waters. And it could even lead to a crisis between ourselves and Tanzania, which may have a ripple effect all the way to South Africa. And in my view, what we should do as we now wait for the ICJ is to ask ourselves who in Kenya dropped the ball so that they suffer the consequences. Because, you know, this issue required a diplomatic intervention. But for some reason, some clever guys within Nairobi thought that it was a legal question. So they pursued the legal path, and now it's going to hit a dead end. But be that as it may, whatever happens, whatever the outcome of the ICJ, in my view, President Kenyatta shouldn't let us lose an inch of our territory, even if it means having the KDF being deployed there on a standby, even if it means recruiting all Kenyans to go and fight. All of us are ready to do that. So when the president tells us to jump, we should be asking ourselves how high. We shouldn't be asking questions.
So we're already in this. Both countries are already in this at the ICJ. We wait for that final hearing. But from where you sit, is it unthinkable that Kenya will lose, or is it the other way around?
Well, right now the probability is 50-50, because we are told when you look at the composition of the ICJ, that the president of that court, in fact, is a man of Somali origin, and he could easily be manipulated, so he could give a position in favor of Somali. And also, even for us, after failing to adopt a diplomatic approach to this issue, we selected a legal team which was very weak, which did not engage in sufficient preparations. So they had to request for more time to go back to their files and reconstitute and get a fresh team. And you begin to ask yourselves, why do we have a careless, almost a casual approach to this issue? Because this is really a serious national asset, which requires all Kenya's top brains. Even if it's there were gangers, there were chorus, weathermen, every single skill we have in Kenya should be deployed to this cause. But for some reason, we are very careless. So at some stage, I begin asking myself, do we actually have people within the national government, or even within the security, or even within the diplomatic circles, who are actually betraying Kenyans, who are traitors? Probably there's a probability actually does exist that maybe some of the people who are spearheading this process, they must have been compromised. Because you would expect everybody to be, hitting the high notes, ensuring that we don't lose our inch.
Interesting you should say that, because it's actually, I've talked to some people quite close to this, and they say the legal team, the Kenyan legal team, was very ill prepared for this, in terms of, even when you look at the documents they come with and the Somali side, they are saying they were not briefed properly. But
Ben, I've seen when this young lawyer goes to court, this is Kipchumba Karori, I see him burning the midnight oil, going through contracts, petition papers, and it's a simple case here at Milimani Commercial Court. So I'm wondering, when you are going to ICJ, why would you be very careless with these important national assignments? And the people who are issuing briefs, is there no quality control? So I think maybe at the end of the day, President Kenyatta needs to relook at his team that he has entrusted and find out whether people have been given dollars, they've been given money from Norway by these multinationals. Because, and the way we are behaving, the way some of these guys are behaving, it's as if they have no insurable interest in Kenya. Maybe they've been given resources, they bought properties in New Zealand, Dubai, and the UK, and they're saying Kenya can go to hell.
Yeah, interesting. Hesbon, it's very unclear whether the ICJ's ruling is binding or is simply advisory. You seem to think that Somalia will take it harder if it loses this.
Yeah, no, not really Somalia. I think the region will probably, because you see, territorial conflicts are very complex, in the sense that it doesn't matter what a court like ICJ does. The issue is the legal mechanism to enforce that is a lot more tricky. So if Somalia loses, and it is Somalia that has been very ferocious in going to court, because they know that technically there is a way in which this coastline already belongs to Kenya, so it's only the court. But now, if the decision goes against them, the question is, will they agree to the decision? And even if they do, is there a likelihood that the area around this disputed maritime border will not be volatile?
Right. But at the same time, Somalia has the longest coastline in Africa, 3,000 kilometers. If Kenya loses this, technically will be landlocked, will be getting, from what I understand, will be getting permission from Mogadishu for us to use the Lamu port, for example, to get into Lapset and into Ethiopia and South Sudan, all the way to Cameroon. it seems to be that Kenya has a lot to lose, a lot more.
I think Kenya has a lot to lose, and that's why I'm fairly optimistic. I mean, I'm not an international law expert, but looking at the broader scheme of things and what precedence has been set by cases, there's a lot of interest that is looked at. That if Kenya was to lose all this, I mean, what is the greater good that the entire region will have? Very minimal, and you wouldn't want to destabilize a society that has been functional by denying a big section of that society something that they really depended on. You may not know the consequences, but I'm not saying that I know what the court will decide, but I think the court will focus on so many things. I mean, you look at a territorial conflict and its complexity. You look at the situation in Somalia. I mean, there's a lot of resources that motivate this, and then there's the influence of the international, other countries from wherever, and then the international bodies within these countries. So you cannot for certain say that if this thing goes the Somalia way, you'll be creating a conducive environment in the East African region. And that gives some weight to Kenya. But I think having said that, where Kenya has reached, it's not a question of blaming who did what or who did not do what at whatever point. Whatever President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Somalian head discussed basically sets the ball rolling. Whether he took back his commitment, I think there was some commitment to some constructive engagement. And regardless of what the court will decide, I think that engagement will be very critical in terms of ensuring that we have a very peaceful coastline and a region that is not destabilized. But where we are, I think Kenyans need to be very collective. We cannot start shooting, ourselves saying that this is what happened. We need a very collective way of looking at this. And I think all the brains that can help this country win this case should come together and help the country win the case.
All right. Kipchumba, Kenya has a lot more to lose, agreeably. Somalia seems more committed to this in terms of how they're addressing this. Many pundits are saying it's because Mohamed Farmajo is facing an election. He doesn't want to leave Villa Somali, the presidential palace. That's why he's this motivated. Where do you see this going?
First of all, Ben, there is an animal that is really devouring this country day in, day out. The animal known as compromise. We have compromised so much to the extent that we even don't know what is our foreign policy as a country. We have no clear clue. If you ask anybody, even international relations students today, if you are to walk into a class in USIU or in University of Nairobi and ask them, as a country, what is our foreign policy? Or what do we relate with African countries or European countries, on what basis? What is the leading principle for us as a people? It is in that principle that it will enlighten us on how to protect our selfish interest. Right. But the other thing that we need to look at, we need to contextualize the issue of these disputed territorial waters in this essence, Ben. We need to agree, first of all, that we are a country that lives on import. That is the first point. If today you are to import, let's say, something from Dubai or somewhere, and that thing used to cost, let's say, in the retail price was 270 shillings, you will have to factor in the money that it will be paid to the Somali authorities. Nobody should tell Kenyans that we will be asking for permission. No, we will be paying for using their waters. That is the first thing. So Mora in Mosocho and somebody in my village have an interest in this issue because we import literally everything. Even when you see our matchsticks, they are written made in China. So the matchstick will have a price.
So if this is the case, Bonakili, why does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs seem a bit so casual in this issue? Or is it maybe they are serious, but they don't have to
maybe
look like
their seriousness is below par, because look at how serious the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was concerned with the issue of Madobe, of Jubaland. They were more excited when Madobe won the election than we are excited about what will happen tomorrow if Kenya is landlocked. My position is this, and even this handshake or what, this is a territorial dispute. One, we need to be firm as a country. We should not allow Farmajo to use that territorial problem for his re-election. They have a 3,000 plus coastline in kilometers. Why don't they? How effective have they been using it? Two, the other issue that we need to address, which is the issue that everybody is sweeping it below the carpet. In this disputed area, it is rich of oil and gas. That is the reason why we are fighting for it. We are not fighting for it because we need anything extra there. No, even Somalia know that. And it is said in other quarters that those blocks have already been sold by the Somali authorities. They were sold to some Norwegian exploration companies. So what they are fighting for is just to ensure that there is vacant possession for the buyers of the blocks. And my take is this. We might discuss ICJ and all other things, but Kenya has to realize that, one, Kenyans up today, we use our taxes to make sure that Somalia is a stable government. Two, we used a lot of resources to make sure that South Sudan is stable. But what did they do after that? They did a lot of other things to harm our business people and the wealth of Kenyans in South Sudan. So going forward, we need, first of all, a foreign affairs ministry that is responsive to our problems. Two, Somali people read history and they know what is happening. They know how we handled Migingo. It might have been 1 acre rock, but it is a Kenyan territory. And if you read the oath of office of President Uhuru Kenyatta, is to protect our territorial integrity. That is expressly written in his oath. So if anything happens, President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto must know that they swore to protect the territorial integrity of this country. And that involves them not allowing even an inch of this country to be taken. And that means, and we come back to the issue of the sword Uhuru Kenyatta was given. He was not given that sword so that he can look powerful. He was given that sword so that he can protect all the corners of this country.
Right. Dismas, there is a lot of foreign pressure on this inside Somalia, very powerful multinational companies, Norwegian oil firms that have been pushing this. We understand there is the composition of the ICJ also is said to be skewed to Somalia, towards Somalia, and to those European nations as well, including Norway. In fact, we are told that the Prime Minister of Somalia is a Norwegian citizen. Is there any possibility that if the ICJ ruling goes against Kenya, Kenya can say, we're not going to take it?
Well, you know, for these kind of disputes, what ICJ is going to say, whichever direction it gives, if the parties in dispute are unhappy, then there's a very high probability that we'll get into our situation. Or we may need to go back to, again, bilateral and multilateral conversations. But, you know, when you look at this issue, Ben, this is a threat to our national security. And when it's a threat to our national security, you begin to wonder, why did we decide to use the legal option? And if ICJ rules in a particular manner, how should we take it? And in my view, where we are right now, in as much as we've been told that Kenya is a big nation and you cannot start fighting with an amorphous state like Somali, President Kenyatta must start flexing his muscles firmly by having KDF deployed, because he got authorization from the National Assembly. So he must deploy KDF for all and sundry to know that they're not going to be stepping on Kenya. And if they want to use history as a precedent over the way Kenya handled Migingo, they should know that this is an entirely different ballgame. Because if you don't do that, the Somalis will take over the area around the Indian Ocean. Then they'll come to eastern, northeastern, and then Ugandans will come all the way to Naivasha. And before you know, you don't have a state called Kenya. So in my view, what President Kenyatta must do, even if they're not going to shoot one bullet, is to have the KDF on standby, so that there's no doubt on anybody's mind that nobody's going to play around with Kenya. But if we just throw our hands in the air and say our destiny is in the ICJ, and then ICJ, because of its composition and the commercial interest, because, you know, we are told, an American saying that money talks. And then there's an obscene one that I'm not going to use on air, but money talks. So we don't know the kind of influence these Western multinationals are doing, using the Norwegian kronas or the sterling pounds or euros or whatever currency they're using. There's a very high chance that like BBI, the outcome of the ICJ has already been predetermined. It's just going to be read, and we suffer. And you know the consequences are just going to be so serious. A few days ago, Kenya hosted the Blue Economy Conference. If we become a sea-locked country, then we're not going to benefit anything from from that, the Blue Economy Conference, then Mombasa is going to become a chapter in history books, because why would anybody now want to go and invest in Mombasa? And you would expect people like Governor Joe to be talking about these issues, but for some reason he's in deep slumber. Maybe that's the reason why resources are being taken to Kisumu, because now Kisumu will become our only, you know, like a seaport or something like that, a lake port. But really, at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what is wrong with this nation called Kenya? Don't we have people who are paid by the taxpayer who wake up every day in the morning to think about Kenya and our territorial integrity, about our strategic plan? Yeah. Why do we have a firefighting approach to every single issue? And in as much as Wilaya is indicating that we are supposed to be looking at the future, I think we can afford to do the same. We can afford to do a sensitivity analysis on ICG and what is likely to happen, how to sort it out, but at the same time, punish the people who have taken us to where we are in this undesirable place. Because this idea that you can spit on everybody, you can vomit on anybody's shoes, now people are spitting on Kenya, they're vomiting on Kenya, and they are dancing to some banks in Europe without any consequences. People must pay for their sins.
Okay. Husband, what would be your advice to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
Well, I think what Dismas is saying probably needs to be buttressed, that Kenya needs to make a statement of intent that we seriously need to protect this, because there's a sense in which the international community needs to understand that there's a greater loss if anything happens in favor of Somalia and not Kenya. But then again, it is Somalia that has been ferocious in seeking, a justice system. And I think there is little that Kenya can do other than be diplomatic about it. But that statement of intent is very critical, so that it is known that Kenya is hell-bent on protecting its
Is Kenya
territory.
getting that UN Security Council slot going to help its case?
I think it would. It would. And I think, we need to be optimistic as Kenyans, because the position that Kenya has held in East and Central Africa is not something that we can wish away. I mean, the stability that we brought in this region cannot just be sacrificed because we are thinking that there are people who can be compromised at the ICJ because they have influences. They have foreign influence from multinationals in Europe and the affiliations that the Somali president has to Norway. I think this is a professional court, and I don't think we can take the mischievous that we see around many other countries to a UN court. So there is some level of optimism, but I think there is a way in which we need to commit ourselves to making our strong intent on protecting this territory.
All right, that's
in the Middle East called Israeli. Okay. If you throw a stone to this nation called Israel and you are the neighbors, you know for a fact they're going to react with fire and fury. Our neighbors should know that Kenya ni moto wa kuotea mbali. But now they think that we are jokers, they're throwing stones all over and we are smiling.
Ben, just a simple thing that we need to help the good professor here understand is that in geopolitics, interests lie above professionalism. If you sit just somewhere thinking that professionalism will save Kenya from whatever is happening without engaging in the geopolitics, everybody wants a piece of Somalia for a simple reason. One, Somalia is not stable. It is a confederation of clans. So the lawlessness in that country is good for even drug laws and all manner of things to mushroom there. So they need as much as possible time in that country. That's and Farmajo is a better ally because his loyalty is in Europe, not in Somalia.
Great. It would be interesting to see how that continues to play out, the geopolitics between Kenya and the Horn of Africa nation, the maritime border disputes that is currently at the ICJ, the final hearing coming up in the next 1 month. Let's take another quick commercial break here on Inside Politics on KTN News. Don't go too far. We are back shortly. We will be talking about that unfortunate incident that happened on Monday last week where 8 pupils lost their lives at the Precious Talent School here in Nairobi. We'll take a look at how that has been happening. The fact that the government has been criticized for lack of schooling amenities in that area. There's no public primary school in that particular ward. Who is to blame for what has been happening? The government has been shutting down most schools.
We can no longer continue ignoring the diaspora constituency. As far as I'm concerned, a few things have happened that are good. One is that the Kenya government has developed a national diaspora policy, which is important. So one of the issues here is for us to start getting a feel of what Kenyans feel about that policy. But over and above that, the diaspora have become very significant because they remit over 200 billion Kenya shillings that comes into the country.